I was part of an exhibition, but I didn't know that my works were going to have problems. I was part of an exhibition that took place on the 13th and 14th of December. This was a significant moment for me, as it marked my first exhibition in 2 years. Leading up to the event, the curator was extremely communicative, answering all my questions promptly and efficiently. This made me feel confident in participating, despite my apprehensions. I paid the exhibition fee, which is standard in these kinds of events, signed a straightforward contract, and sent my artwork, trusting that the process would proceed smoothly. For context, the past year had been incredibly difficult for me. I had been unable to work due to severe mental health struggles, and even my art practice, which had been a cornerstone of my life for over a decade, had suffered. This exhibition was supposed to be a turning point, a step towards reclaiming my identity as an artist. With a master's degree in curating and years of experience participating in group exhibitions, I believed I understood the expectations and processes involved. Typically, the workflow for an exhibition is straightforward. The curator finalizes the administrative side, collecting fees and contracts. Artists send their work to the curator. The curator confirms receipt of the artwork. The exhibition is prepared and installed, a private view is held, and updates are shared on social media. After the exhibition, the curator informs the artist about sales and arranges for the return of unsold works. The artwork is posted back to the artist, with tracking updates provided. The artist receives their work safely or receives payment for sold pieces. For this exhibition, however, the process fell apart after step 2. After sending my artwork, I received no confirmation that it had arrived. I only knew it was there because I recognized it in the background of some photos shared online. This lack of communication was concerning but not yet alarming. The exhibition came and went. After a week of silence following its conclusion, I sent a polite email on December 20th, seeking an update on the status of my work. I refrained from reaching out earlier because I didn't want to appear impatient or unprofessional. I sent follow-up emails on the 22nd, 27th, 28th, and 30th, each one slightly more urgent than the last. During this time, the curator remained active on social media, which added to my frustration. There was no out-of-office reply, no indication that she was unavailable, and no response to my messages. Eventually, I resorted to sending a message on the official curator account as well. In all my messages, I was polite and professional, simply asking for updates and clarity about the return of my work. However, as days turned into weeks, my tone became more desperate. The lack of communication was unsettling, especially given the curator's earlier responsiveness. Finally, on December 30th, after weeks of silence, I sent the following email. I need to hear from you by the end of this week. If I don't, I'm afraid I'll have to consider the work stolen. You haven't left an out-of-office email to indicate you're away or any other reason why you might not respond to my emails and messages. As a curator, I know how incredibly important it is to keep artists in the loop about their work. This is my only form of income, and to not be responding to my emails or returning my work is unprofessional and extremely concerning. I expect to hear from you by the end of the week. Additionally, I left a comment on her personal Instagram account, which is public, asking her to check her emails. While this felt like a drastic step, I believed it was necessary to get her attention. To my relief, she finally responded later that day. However, her reply was far from reassuring. I have been on holiday over Christmas and certainly not attending to admin. It is a shame you have accused me of ludicrous things, as I had a buyer for your work who I am seeing on 5th January, and my intentions were to discuss the outcome with you then. I absolutely do not steal work from my artists. This is sadly how I am repaid for promoting your work for you, not to mention leaving comments on my personal Instagram, which is very unprofessional. I will send your work back when I start admin work again on 6th January. By the way, everyone else who exhibited postcards for the exhibition donated them for sale to raise funds for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which grants wishes to very poorly children, and a rather large donation has been made. Not stolen their work. Reading her email left me feeling stunned and deeply frustrated. The exhibition had ended on December 14th, well before the holiday season, giving ample time for her to address administrative tasks. She had left no out-of-office message, nor had she mentioned in the contract or any prior communication that she would only handle returns in the new year. Furthermore, I had explicitly included return postage with my submission, and at no point did she clarify that works were being donated. Her claim that this was a charity exhibition was an even greater shock. I had understood the event to be a curated exhibition focused on the space and its theme, not a charity fundraiser. I had sent 4 postcard-sized pieces under the impression that they were part of a selected collection. Had I known this was primarily a charity event, I wouldn't have participated, as my financial situation didn't allow for such a contribution. I had even sought clarification on aspects of the exhibition brief before sending my work, but the charitable aspect was never disclosed. Feeling compelled to address her response, I replied, "It has been weeks of me wondering what has happened to my work. I have been continuously stressed by the lack of communication. You weren't clear that you would be dealing with admin and the return of my artworks in the new year. Nowhere in previous communications does it say that. Have you read all of my previous emails? You can clearly see me getting more and more desperate because of the lack of communication. I genuinely do not care at this point that you're offended by me having to take further steps to get your attention and communicate. You had left me in an extremely uncomfortable position. My reaction to that is completely on you. I tried to contact you for weeks. There is absolutely nothing unprofessional about a working-class artist trying to desperately find out what has happened to their only form of income. You knew when the exhibition was over, yet you decided to completely disappear. What did you expect? I have been left in a ridiculous position by a curator who should know better. This all could have been avoided with an out-of-office email. But you didn't do that, and I have been trying to get hold of you for weeks. I do not care that you're offended. You should have handled this better. And now you're trying to make me feel guilty about it, which is wild considering the circumstances you have put me in. This entire experience has been emotionally draining. I entered the exhibition hoping it would help me regain my footing as an artist, but instead, it left me feeling undervalued and dismissed. The lack of transparency and communication has been both unprofessional and hurtful, particularly given the personal and financial stakes involved. While I'm relieved to have finally received a response, this situation has underscored the importance of clear communication and respect in professional relationships. Following the stressful ordeal with the curator, I took some time to reflect on what had happened and how I could move forward. The entire experience had been a harsh reminder of the challenges artists face when dealing with professional institutions, even those that claim to support and uplift creatives. While the immediate issue of retrieving my artwork seemed resolved, the emotional and professional impact lingered. To begin with, I started documenting the entire process. Every email I had sent, every message exchanged, and every detail I could recall was compiled into a chronological timeline. This wasn't just for my own clarity, but also as a potential resource for other artists who might find themselves in similar situations. It became clear to me that part of the problem lay in the lack of transparency in the curator's communication and the assumptions made about the artist's understanding of the exhibition's purpose. The cornerstone of any professional relationship is communication. Throughout this process, I was struck by how the lack of clear and consistent updates had created unnecessary tension. It wasn't just the silence that was troubling, but also the tone of the eventual responses, which seemed to deflect responsibility rather than address the issue constructively. This raised larger questions for me. How do artists protect themselves in these situations? What steps can be taken to ensure that all parties, curators, artists, and institutions are held accountable to basic standards of professionalism? While I had always prided myself on understanding both the artist and curator perspectives, this experience made me question how often power imbalances in the art world go unaddressed. After organizing my thoughts, I decided to reach out to other artists who had participated in the same exhibition. I wanted to understand if their experiences mirrored mine, or if this had been an isolated incident. To my surprise, several of them reported similar feelings of confusion and frustration. While a few had been informed about the charitable nature of the event, many, like me, were unaware until after their works had been submitted. One artist shared how they had initially been excited to participate, but felt disheartened by the lack of follow-up. "I didn't even know if my work sold," they told me. "It's like we were just an afterthought." Another artist mentioned that they had been hesitant to say anything publicly because they feared it might harm their reputation. This was a sentiment I could deeply empathize with. As artists, we often walk a fine line between advocating for ourselves and avoiding conflict that might jeopardize future opportunities. From these conversations, a few key takeaways emerged. Clarify terms upfront. Before agreeing to any exhibition, it's crucial to ask detailed questions about the purpose of the event, the handling of artwork, and what will happen after the exhibition concludes. While this might seem tedious, it can prevent misunderstandings. Document everything. Keeping a paper trail of all communications is essential. In this case, having records of the curator's initial emails and my follow-ups helped me build a clear narrative of what had happened. Speak up. While it can feel risky, addressing issues directly and professionally is often the only way to resolve them. Waiting in silence only prolongs the stress. Build a support network. Connecting with other artists can provide both emotional support and practical advice. Sharing experiences can also highlight broader patterns that need to be addressed within the art community. Despite the difficulties, this experience became a catalyst for personal and professional growth. I realized that while I couldn't control the actions of others, I could take steps to advocate for myself and help create a more supportive environment for fellow artists. With this in mind, I decided to start a small online group dedicated to artist advocacy and transparency. The group quickly grew, with members sharing their stories and offering advice on navigating the often opaque world of art exhibitions. One of our first projects was to create a guide for artists, outlining questions to ask before agreeing to exhibit and red flags to watch for. The guide emphasized the importance of understanding contracts, clarifying financial terms, and ensuring there was a clear plan for the return of unsold artwork. On a personal level, the ordeal also reignited my commitment to my art practice. While the experience had initially left me feeling disillusioned, it ultimately reminded me of why I had pursued art in the first place. I began sketching again, allowing myself the freedom to create without the pressure of external validation. It was a slow process, but with each piece, I felt a little closer to reclaiming the joy and passion that had once defined my work. I also began exploring themes of resilience and empowerment in my art. One series, inspired by the experience with the exhibition, featured abstract representations of barriers and breakthroughs. The works were raw and honest, reflecting the vulnerability and strength required to navigate challenges as an artist. As the months went on, I realized that my art and advocacy efforts were deeply intertwined. Through my work, I could shed light on the systemic issues within the art world and amplify the voices of those who felt unheard. One of my pieces, titled Unspoken Agreements, depicted a fragmented contract surrounded by abstract forms symbolizing miscommunication and lost trust. The piece resonated with many viewers and sparked conversations about the need for greater transparency and accountability in the art world. I also began hosting workshops for emerging artists, focusing on professional practices and self-advocacy. These sessions covered topics such as reading contracts, negotiating terms, and maintaining healthy boundaries in professional relationships. Seeing the impact these workshops had on participants was incredibly rewarding and reinforced my belief in the power of community and education. Looking back, the experience with the exhibition was undeniably challenging, but it also served as a turning point. It pushed me to confront uncomfortable truths about the art world and take active steps to create positive change. While I can't say I'm grateful for the ordeal, I am proud of how I chose to respond to it. As I move forward, I'm committed to continuing this work both as an artist and as an advocate. The art world can be a daunting place, but with transparency, communication, and mutual support, I believe it can also be a space where creativity and collaboration thrive. The challenges I faced during and after the exhibition prompted a deeper exploration into the systemic issues within the art world. The lack of communication, unclear terms, and power imbalances that were so evident in my experience are not isolated problems. They are reflective of broader, entrenched issues that many artists encounter. This realization spurred me to think beyond my personal situation and consider ways to advocate for meaningful change in the art world. I began by researching common grievances among artists, Through online forums, social media groups, and conversations with peers, I compiled a list of recurring problems. These included lack of transparency in contracts and exhibition terms, poor communication from curators and galleries, exploitation of artists through unpaid exhibitions or ambiguous financial arrangements, limited avenues for artists to advocate for themselves without fear of retaliation. The more I dug into these issues, the clearer it became that many of them stemmed from a culture where artists are expected to endure unfair treatment in exchange for exposure. This exposure economy devalues the labor and creativity of artists, perpetuating a cycle of exploitation. Recognizing that systemic issues require collective action, I reached out to other artists, curators, and art administrators who shared my concerns. Together, we formed an informal coalition dedicated to addressing these problems. Our initial meetings were small, but they were filled with passionate discussions about the need for change. One of our first initiatives was to create a set of best practices for curators and galleries. These guidelines emphasized transparency, respect, and fair compensation for artists. We published the document online and encouraged institutions to adopt it as part of their standard operations. While we knew this wouldn't solve all the problems, it was a step toward fostering a culture of accountability. As part of our efforts, we launched a social media campaign to amplify artists' stories. Using the hashtag #FairArtWorld, we invited artists to share their experiences with unfair treatment and to highlight what changes they wanted to see. The response was overwhelming. Stories poured in from artists around the world, detailing everything from unpaid exhibitions to contracts that demanded exorbitant commission fees. This campaign not only raised awareness, but also created a sense of solidarity among artists. Many expressed relief at finding a community that understood their struggles. For me, this was one of the most rewarding aspects of our work, seeing artists come together to support one another and demand better treatment. While some institutions were resistant to change, others were surprisingly open to collaboration. We began reaching out to galleries and curators to discuss how they could implement more equitable practices. These conversations were not always easy, but they were productive. By framing the discussion as a partnership rather than a confrontation, we were able to make progress with several organizations. One notable success was a mid-sized gallery that agreed to pilot a new artist contract template we had developed. The template included clear terms for compensation, communication timelines, and the return of unsold works. Feedback from both the gallery and the artists involved was overwhelmingly positive, and the template has since been adopted by other institutions. Another key aspect of our work was education. We realized that many of the problems artists face stem from a lack of knowledge about their rights and the business side of the art world. To address this, we organized workshops and webinars aimed at emerging artists. Topics included understanding contracts and negotiation, recognizing red flags and exhibition opportunities, building a professional network, advocating for fair treatment. These sessions were well received, with many participants expressing gratitude for the practical advice and resources provided. It was heartening to see young artists gaining the tools and confidence to navigate the art world more effectively. Through this work, I found myself growing not only as an advocate, but also as an artist. The process of organizing, collaborating, and educating others deepened my understanding of the art world and my place within it. It also reminded me of the power of community and the importance of standing up for what is right. I began incorporating these themes into my art, creating pieces that explored ideas of fairness, advocacy, and solidarity. One series, titled Foundations of Change, featured layered abstract compositions that symbolized the interconnected efforts required to build a more equitable art world. The series resonated with audiences, sparking conversations about the role of art in driving social change. As our coalition grew, so did our ambitions. We started collaborating with larger organizations, such as artist unions and advocacy groups, to amplify our impact. Together, we developed resources like an online directory of artist-friendly galleries and a guide to legal support for artists. We also began hosting an annual conference, bringing together artists, curators, and administrators to discuss the challenges facing the art world and brainstorm solutions. These events were a powerful reminder of what could be achieved through collective action. Each conference ended with a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to continue the work. Of course, the journey was not without its challenges. Resistance from certain institutions, limited funding, and the sheer scope of the issues we were tackling often felt overwhelming. There were moments of frustration and doubt, but these were outweighed by the progress we were making and the support we received from the artist community. One particularly difficult moment came when a high-profile gallery publicly dismissed our efforts, claiming that artists should be grateful for any opportunity to showcase their work. While disheartening, this response only strengthened our resolve to challenge such attitudes and push for systemic change. Despite the challenges, I remain optimistic about the future. The conversations we've started and the connections we've built are laying the groundwork for a more equitable and supportive art world. There is still much work to be done, but the progress we've made so far gives me hope. For me, this journey has been about more than just addressing the issues I faced during the exhibition. It's been about creating a legacy of fairness and advocacy that will benefit not only my peers but also future generations of artists. As I continue this work, I am inspired by the resilience and creativity of the artist community and by the belief that together we can build a better art world. The journey that began with frustration and uncertainty ultimately led to personal transformation, professional growth, and a deeper understanding of the art world. As I worked to advocate for myself and others, I also found ways to reconcile the initial challenges with a sense of closure and purpose. It was time to bring this chapter to a close, not as an ending, but as the beginning of something more meaningful. Looking back at the conflict with the curator, I realized that it had been a pivotal moment. What initially felt like a personal attack had revealed broader systemic issues that many artists face. Revisiting my emails, messages, and responses, I could see how my frustration had been fueled not only by the curator's lack of communication, but also by the powerlessness I felt in the situation. However, this experience taught me that even in moments of vulnerability, there is strength in speaking up. By asserting my concerns and demanding accountability, I had taken a stand not only for myself, but for all artists who encounter similar challenges. While the curator's response had been disappointing, the lessons I learned were invaluable. As I reflected on the progress made by the coalition and our advocacy efforts, I felt a sense of pride. The workshops, resources, and campaigns we had initiated were making a tangible difference. Artists who had once felt isolated were now finding community and support. Institutions that had resisted change were beginning to adopt more equitable practices. To ensure the sustainability of these efforts, we established a formal organization. Named Artists for Equity, the group aimed to continue advocating for fair treatment and transparency in the art world. We secured funding through grants and donations, allowing us to expand our initiatives. These included legal aid for artists, partnering with pro bono lawyers to offer legal advice and contract review services. Mentorship programs, connecting emerging artists with experienced professionals who could guide them through the complexities of the art world. Equity certification, developing a certification program for galleries and curators that adhered to our best practices, helping artists identify supportive institutions. Through these efforts, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had started as a personal struggle had evolved into a movement for systemic change. While advocacy work was fulfilling, I also needed to reconnect with my art practice. The challenges of the past year had left me feeling disconnected from my creativity. To heal, I turned to the one thing that had always brought me solace: making art. I began working on a new series titled Echoes of Resilience. The pieces explored themes of strength, vulnerability, and transformation. Each work was a reflection of my journey, incorporating abstract forms and layered textures to convey the complexity of my experiences. One piece, The Turning Point, depicted a fractured surface gradually coming together, symbolizing the way challenges can lead to growth and unity. Another, Shared Voices, featured overlapping patterns representing the collective power of artists advocating for change. These works resonated deeply with viewers, sparking conversations about resilience and solidarity. As I prepared to exhibit Echoes of Resilience, I decided to include an artist statement that shared my journey. For the first time, I openly discussed the conflict with the curator and the advocacy work it had inspired. This was not an act of blame or resentment, but an acknowledgement of the lessons learned and the growth that had followed. The exhibition received an overwhelmingly positive response. Many visitors shared their own stories of overcoming challenges, and some expressed gratitude for the transparency and honesty in my work. It was a reminder that art has the power to connect people, to heal, and to inspire change. With the exhibition behind me, I felt ready to move forward. The experiences of the past year had been transformative, shaping me into a more resilient artist and a stronger advocate. While I knew there would always be challenges ahead, I felt equipped to face them with confidence and purpose. I also realized the importance of balance. Advocacy and art were both integral parts of my identity, but I needed to ensure that neither overshadowed the other. By maintaining this balance, I could continue to create meaningful work while contributing to a more equitable art world. As a final act of closure, I wrote an open letter to fellow artists. In it, I shared my story and the lessons I had learned. Dear fellow artists, the art world is full of beauty and challenges, opportunities and obstacles. As creators, we pour our hearts into our work, often facing uncertainty and vulnerability in the process. But we are not alone. Over the past year, I've learned the importance of advocating for ourselves and supporting one another. I've seen the power of collective action and the strength that comes from standing up for what is right. These lessons were not easy, but they were worth it. To those facing challenges, know that your voice matters. Speak up, seek support, and remember that you deserve respect and fairness. To those in positions of power, use your influence to uplift and empower artists. Transparency, communication, and accountability are not just ideals, they are necessities. Together, we can build a better art world, one that values creativity, integrity, and collaboration. Let's continue to create, to advocate, and to inspire. With hope and solidarity, writing this letter felt like the final brushstroke on a canvas that had taken a year to complete. It was a moment of closure and a declaration of my commitment to the values that had emerged from this journey. As I look to the future, I am filled with a sense of optimism. The challenges I faced have not only strengthened me, but have also deepened my connection to the artist community. While the road ahead may still have its difficulties, I am confident that we can navigate it together, creating a world where art and advocacy thrive hand in hand.